Hope is the lifeblood of change. Without it, nothing positive happens in a person's life. Without it, a good life doesn't make sense. Why work on a car that you know will never run? I believe we're born with hope, but sometimes it gets beaten out of you. When you wake up in the same manure that you went to sleep in, you eventually become afraid to hope. I gave up on hope when someone came along and showed me another way out. If you're on a torture rack and someone offers to take you off, even if they're going to expect you to do things you never thought you'd do, you're going to accept their help, especially if you're a child. I took the help, and then I stayed in that hopeless world for a long time. I didn't care if I hurt you. I didn't care if you hurt me. Nothing mattered. I waited for the worst, and it found me over and over. So what finally turned my hope back on? Having nowhere else to go. It was my last stand. It was reach for something or die. I reached for God. I chose to believe He would help me if He were asked to. And slowly, He did. Hope returns as a thin thread. In that moment, you actually start to believe you might be worth something. You've got to hang on till the thread becomes a rope. Then till it becomes a ladder. Then things change.
When you get to a place in your addiction and incarceration and in the abuse and all of the stuff that comes with the life that you're living as you're going through, and you start to feel hopeless and helpless and loveless and useless and lifeless, if you don't have hope, you don't have a future, you don't have a vision, you can't see yourself past where you are right now without hope. I would be dead right now without that hope. If someone wouldn't have came to me and said, there is hope for you to change, and I've got the way out, I've got the answer. If you are willing to receive this hope, you'll never be the same. Had I not received that, had I not heard those words, I know that I would not be walking this earth right now. We can't make it without hope.
So where is hope? And how do we get it back? Especially if we're not sure we ever had it to begin with. Number 1, go back to the beginning. It's been said we are all born with seeds of hope. But if we were born into a hopeless situation, they may never have had a chance to bloom.
I'm in my dream, this would be a monster coming down, with these keys, and I wouldn't be able to move. And so I remember living with a lot of fear. However, that came about in many different ways. But so I started getting used to violence.
I always live a hard life, a drug life, gangster fighting and been around pimps and players and stuff like that all my life. I don't understand life. It's so hard for me. I mean, so hard. It was very, very scary. It was, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it because I never got a chance to live.
Other times, we know exactly when we lost our hope. We know because it was stolen from us.
We had such a close relationship, and so playing at her house was just normal. Go over there all the time. And so when her dad began to touch me, I totally lost all sense of, number 1, trust for anybody. And I felt so hopeless at that point. Like everything out of me had drained, and I was so confused. I didn't know what to think or where to go, or I just knew it was wrong. That's how I felt. This is wrong. This cannot be right.
Even when life is hard, hope is strong. It hangs on through bad times and through bad choices for years. But if you throw enough water on a fire, eventually the flame goes out.
I didn't realize this till later, but looking back, I thought, man, I can deal with this, and I can see now that I could not deal with it, with my anger and with the violence that was always around me, but it wasn't around me, I was around other people. And I tried to escape from Ventura, going to Alaska, and then I tried to escape Alaska, coming to Minnesota. And it was usually after an event like that or some type of violent interaction. I figured I'd try something new. But I brought myself, who was the problem, with me. And I was here in Minnesota for 2 weeks. I was invited to a party on my birthday. And the same stuff that used to happen when I was a kid, because of the color of my skin and where I lived, that's why I started fighting in the first place, and found out as a youngster that beating somebody up made them stop teasing you or stop messing with you about that. And so learning that at a young age, I just did it for the rest of my young life. And when we got to this party, a friend of mine, we went in, was greeted at the door, got an altercation, and I took a man's life that night.
I ended up working in strip clubs and working for escort companies and selling my body for drugs on a very high end. Budweiser shooter girl, and just thought that working the bike weeks and traveling around the world and just that attention that I had it made. But through that, my addiction just continued to get worse and worse. And before you know it, I couldn't work in the same clubs anymore, and the clubs just got worse and worse, and the men got worse and worse. The drug addiction got worse, and I began to go in and out of jail and in and out of jail, and just got into a real cycle of hopelessness.
Number 2, go back to your worst moment.
Everything I loved, I lost. And everything I hated, I gained. I lost my job, I lost my family, my wife and children, and lost my identity, and because of that, I got very suicidal.
I had this horrendous pain in my chest and through my whole body of hopelessness and fear and sadness. And I didn't know what else to do. I knew I was going to go to prison. I knew I didn't want to see myself anymore. So I would tie a sheet around my neck and pray that I would have the guts to roll over and hang myself. And that's how I would sleep most nights.
This is incredibly painful. But only by taking an honest look at where we've been can we see how far we have already come. Because here's the thing, we're still here.
With the sheet around. Yeah, with the sheet around my neck.
But you never rolled over?
I never rolled over.
Number 3, don't believe the naysayers. Others may have lost hope in us, and let's face it, we gave them some good reasons.
My family wasn't really that proud of me or didn't care to hear that I was going to rehab for the 10th time. They're just kind of got to the point where they're like, all right, great, well, call us when you're done.
Because I know how it is to burn your bridges. And when nobody don't believe in you anymore, that hurts so bad. That just hurts so bad when everyone just turn their backs and don't believe in you no more.
Don't believe them. It's not too late. it is never too late. Number 4, surrender to hope. This is almost as hard as looking back. Letting go is scary, but let's be honest. What are we holding on to?
I planned to kill him. That was my goal that day. And I stood there on top of this grate. It's a piece of concrete border, and there's a grate on it. It's like an intake for the air for the building. And I stood there and watched them and waited for them to get back behind the ball diamond fence. And at the moment that I was going to step forward and go stab as many of them as I could, I believe that God spoke to me at that moment and said to me that if you do this, you have no part with me. That scared the living daylights out of me, because no one was standing next to me, and it wasn't like, hi, it's not like a voice like that. I don't speak like that. You have no part with me. I remember going back inside. I remember ditching that, going back inside, and I never carried anything in prison ever again. Never carried another weapon ever again. Never kept another weapon in my cell ever again. And that was late summer, and then all winter, other Christians in the facility, these guys are lifers, started to witness to me. And I started to listen. And I felt like excitement and kind of hopefulness when I was in school, going through college, whatever. That was a different type of hope. That was like an expectant, I was expecting to finish school, so I was excited about that. But hope didn't enter my life until I realized Jesus Christ is real.
For me, a big part of my transformation was allowing hope back in my life. I would always tell myself that it was too late. It was too late to change the path I was on. It was too late for me to go to college. It was too late for me to experience a healthy relationship. It was too late for me to be a good mom. I had no hope. And that was the problem. I was operating on fear. Everything I would tell myself, every bad thing, I would believe. And so I never strived for more. I never thought it would have more. My hope was dead. And it was a slow thing, but I started to realize that none of those things were true, that I still had my whole life ahead of me. It wasn't over. And now I have nothing but hope. And it's just such a huge difference.
I did the math, and I thought, I'm not going to see my kids till they're grown, and I started to weep. I went back to my cell. This guy handed me a Bible. I got locked down in my cell, and I remember just sitting there and I was crying. And I thought, what has happened? How did I get here?
And then I asked God to please, if there's any way that I don't have to ever go back to prostitution, can you make that happen? But I know that He reads my heart, and I had to be really totally willing to let go of a lot of things that I thought that I needed. And it was about totally surrendering to what God's plan for my life was. And that was really scary, because I still didn't understand that He actually loved me. So would He have a good plan for me? I don't know. Would He punish me? Would I have to work really hard to get anything good because I had been so naughty? I didn't know. I didn't know because I hadn't grasped yet that He loved me. But I knew that I didn't want that anymore. So I surrendered.
Number 5, watch hope return. Sometimes a little wind is all that's needed to bring a fire back to life.
Literally the next day, I get this letter in the mail.
And it said I could live in my house for a whole year because then I went into foreclosure and I didn't have to pay any rent. And I was able to start seeing the possibility of getting out of prostitution. And I also started feeling that, well, maybe he does love me, you know?
He really changed the direction in which I was thinking, you know? See, because like, when they give you enough time where you think you'll never go home, a lot of your aspirations to do stuff changes. You know what I'm saying? You don't really have a lot of energy to do, you know, to put in projects, you know? And that's what he had me thinking, you know what I'm saying? That, hey man, you know, you in here. He said they gave you an out date. That means that you're gonna get out of here.
To me, hope was what got me from my darkest moment to where I am right now. I'd been in my 10th treatment center and I was ready to give up on life. I mean, I believe in God and I prayed and asked him to just take my life because I didn't want to go on anymore. And I heard him speak to me in that moment that I still have hope in you. And I thought, what kind of God would want to talk to me? I'm almost on my deathbed in this moment, and yet he spoke that to me, and that was a little bit of energy I needed to keep going.
They tell me later, but I had walked out, and immediately as I walked out, they hired me. And the president later on tells me, and this is months later, he sees me down at the, what do they call it, at the hiring hall. And I went down there because you have the union meetings. I went and paid my dues, and he said, Jose, and I said, yes, sir. He says, the reason that I'm always excited to see you is because I deserved to go to prison when I was younger and didn't. You went to prison and you still don't give up. And it's like the guy made me break down, you know, in the office, and I really appreciated his honesty.
Because of my journey now, going around this country and seeing people on this heroin addiction and opiate addiction and how they are so sucked into the lie and they believe that they have no life, that they have no hope, that there's nothing for them, that they have gone too far. They've went to a place where there's no turning back. How could I do anything else but go and tell them that that's not true? I'm a walking, breathing example that life can change.
Hope is always here, but we have to claim it. We have to receive it. Hope is our only hope.